On today's Eastern Conference Recap Wednesday of Locked On NHL, we're 9 days away from the trade deadline, and it seems like everything runs through Calgary. But which Eastern Conference teams could be interested in Noah Hanifin and Chris Tanev? We'll also draft our top available players according to TSN's trade bait board. That's all coming up and more on this week's edition of the Eastern Conference Recap. Locked On NHL, it's your team every day.
You're Locked On NHL, your daily podcast on the National Hockey League. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What is up, hockey fans? Welcome back for another week of Eastern Conference, not only recap, but it's trade season. So a lot of this show is going to be projecting where guys fit according to TSN's trade bait board. Today's episode is brought to you by Gametime. Want to go see new players in different spots? If you're going to the game, go check out Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDON for $20 off your first ticket purchase. Today is Wednesday, February 28th. As always, I'm Ross Levitan. You can find me 5 days a week at Locked On Ottawa Senators, and it's the Battle of Ontario edition because I'm alongside Mike DiStefano from Locked On Maple Leafs. Mike, I know you're a big trade guy. You like speculation. What's been top of your agenda so far after seeing the names that are available?
Yeah, I mean, obviously, being a guy that covers the Maple Leafs for a living, there's a lot of guys up at the top of that board that are of interest. Namely, the dude who's is he at the top? No, he's second right now. Chris Tanev has been a name that a lot of Leaf fans have been looking at. Sean Walker, another guy, and Ilya Lyubushkin. So I've been looking at a lot of defensemen. I feel like it's a very defensive heavy trade deadline. Like when it comes to star power up front, there doesn't seem to be a whole lot of that. You've got Jake Gensel, and that kind of drops off from there, and Gensel's even injured. So this is going to be an interesting trade deadline, because if you're looking to upgrade up front with some star power, not sure that it's really there now that I guess Elias Lindholm is off the board. It's really going to be focused on, defense, I think.
Okay, and yes, we have seen some wild rumors coming out, guys who aren't on the trade bait list. We'll get into that a little bit later on in the show, but like Chris Tanev is the name that I think most fans want. The other week, Mike, I asked you, I said, is this a guy that if you're Calgary, you look to trade sooner than later? Because there's an 80% chance every shift, the way he plays so hard, that he could get injured. And he leads the league in going to the locker room after blocking a shot with his face, his elbow, his arm.
Always
He'll get anything
back,
in front.
though.
Always comes back.
Roxy.
This guy, I mean, he is the definition of a warrior. And he's the type of guy where if your team acquires him, you're not only getting a great player, you're sending a message to everyone else in that room that you are adding toughness, you're adding determination, you're adding a guy that can take a team to the next level. He, to me, is number one in terms of impact that could be made on a team, because we know in the playoffs, everything tightens up. Those types of players are the ones that have the most value. Obviously, the goal scorers and everything, but it's just as important to keep the puck out of your net, out of your zone, out of your crease, and Chris Tanev does that. So he, to me, is like the very top echelon in what feels like a defense-heavy crop of trade bait. Of course, there could be names that come off the list, but out of these guys, like, is this going to be a domino effect where some of the guys below him are going to have to go to set the market?
I don't know. I think Tanev, apparently, I was listening yesterday, and Darren Dreger was saying that there's as many as 12 teams that are checking in on Tanev pretty regularly. And Dallas apparently is the team who's currently the front runner, which I thought was interesting. Makes a lot of sense. But I think that Tanev is probably going to have to go first, and then we'll see the rest of these guys come off the board. I think that ultimately, if you still have a shot to get Chris Tanev, why would you blow your, all of your chips on somebody else if Tanev is still available? You know what I mean? Like, if you're interested in, let's say, a Nick Seeler, you're interested in a Matt Dumbo or a Lyubushkin, I mean, you would probably still rather be able to get Chris Tanev. The only way I think you go elsewhere is if, the price point for Tanev is so high that you don't even think you'll come close to meeting it. If that's the case, like here in Toronto, for example, it's been let known to management that it's going to be a first round pick since they don't have a second round pick, which is apparently the ask on Tanev. And since they don't have one, it's going to cost them a first. And so Toronto might balk at that and just go, all right, well, let's move on because we don't have a second round pick and we're not willing to go to a first rounder either. And I would imagine that other teams will be able to put together a better package than a third and like a prospect of some kind. So that might be the way that you see some of these other guys come off the board. But at the same time, I think if there's still a chance to get a Chris Tanev, you probably keep yourselves in those sweepstakes as long as possible.
And Dave Pagnotta from the fourth period, he's, one of those kind of guys who has his ear to the streets, we'll say. He thinks that the asking price for a whole host of defensemen, including Sean Walker and Matt Dumba in Arizona right now, it's a first round pick. And it feels like that's the sellers setting the price extremely high. I know.
A first round pick for Matt Dumba
on an expiring contract. Yes.
You've got to be Dumba to spend a first round pick on Dumba, my friend.
Yeah, I'd say so. If I'm calling Arizona, it's for Sean Durzi. It's not for Matt Dumba right now. And all of it. Hey, I've got a stat, or not a stat, but me just poking around. And after hearing that, I looked. The Arizona Coyotes don't have a single defenseman signed for next season. Every single one of their defensemen is either UFA or RFA after this year.
Does not surprise me at all. They play in a college rink. Who wants to commit to that place?
I'm going in less than a month. I want to see the Stars play at old Mullet Arena.
I've always thought that, like, Arizona should want these terrible contracts and should want to go out and get all of these players who are on like bad long-term deals, and just so that they have bodies to play, because that's not an attractive destination for free agents. It just isn't. Like, maybe it is in a sense where you can get players 1 year at a time. Like Jason Zucker decided to go there for 1 year, trying up his value, and the money was there for them because they had to overpay to get him there. Same thing, Kerfoot went and signed, and Dumba, the player we're talking about, signed a 1 year deal to try and reset his value a little bit, with knowing he's going to have some extra playing time out there. So I guess it can be an attractive destination if they pay you enough. But I've always thought that, like, I think that if there's teams that are looking to dump salary and like players who have term, like, that should be the team that I call. It's like, you need players. You need guys who are committed and who are locked in with term, because you're not an attractive free agent destination. I'm sorry. It's not the case.
No, it's not. But this is the time of year where it's all about asset management. And one thing the Coyotes do have, and we'll kind of hand this over to Locked On Coyotes to take on more. You can find them wherever you get your podcast. You know how many second round picks they have in the next 3 drafts?
Like 8.
More.
9.
More
than 9 second round picks
in the next 3 drafts. They have 3 this year, 4 the year after, and 3 the year after that.
Oh my goodness.
This year they have 1 first, 3 seconds, 3 thirds. Next year they have 4 seconds and 2 thirds, and the following year 3 seconds and 2 thirds. Only 1 first only 1 first in each of those years. So you wonder if maybe they're asking for a first from Dumba, but it's going to be like Dumba and a third for a first, or Dumba and a second for a first. You know what I mean? Just to try to move into that. I'm not sure, but we've also heard this draft there's a big fall off after about 20. So there's going to be some cat and mouse in terms of, like, if you're a team that thinks they can make a run in the playoffs, but you're one of the teams that hasn't won the division, or you're not going to be drafting guaranteed in the mid 20s. If you have a first round exit, all of a sudden, or even a second round exit, because we know the top 4 teams draft the final 4, and then it's the division winners beyond that, all of a sudden you could be giving up something a little more value than you had initially thought. So there's plenty for general managers to be in their heads about as we enter the most critical part of the season for certain teams. But one thing I want to dispel, because we always talk briefly about our teams. You want to hit on that? Because I got one Senator's comment before we move into our draft, which I'm really looking forward to.
Oh, go ahead. Go with your Sens conversation.
Well,
I mean, the Leafs, they were playing some of their best hockey of late. They finally lost their first game.
I heard they might put Ridley Gregg's number up in the rafters at the Scotiabank Arena.
If the Maple Leafs win a Stanley Cup, I would potentially consider retiring that number. Yes, I would. If the Leafs
71
win a Stanley Cup, I'll put 71 on the cup. I do it. I put 71 on the cup
wait,
as an assistant.
is 71 not retired for David Clarkson though yet?
Not yet. Not yet.
Not
I don't
yet.
think he's been gone long enough for that to be retired. Not yet.
Amazing.
It's
No,
available.
I just want to dispel as a rumor from the Spit and Chicklets podcast and Ryan Whitney about the Sens potentially moving on from Brady Tkachuk. And I've dispelled that in my own accord. And apparently Steve Stais, Sens general manager, I haven't had a chance to listen to it. It's happening right now. He was on the podcast, Got Your Back podcast with Pierre LeBrun, one of our former colleagues or your current colleague with TSN. And he literally laughed out loud when they brought it up to him and said they're building around Brady Tkachuk. And that's that. So end of story. I know obviously we have to discuss it, whether it's a guy sitting on his couch a few deep at the end of the night watching hockey and just messing around, but when their podcast has 600,000 followers on social media, things blow up in a hurry. So just want to dispel that the Senators are building around Brady Tkachuk, so you can take those trade proposals and throw them in the garbage.
Agreed.
Okay. On the other side, we'll get to our draft. We're going to each pick. We're getting back to our roots. It's a big summer thing for us here on the Eastern Conference recap show where we draft our starting lineup. So we've each got a goalie, 2 defensemen, and 3 forwards. We're not going to worry about centers and wings. 3 forwards, 2 defensemen, and a goalie. Maybe Mikey will take 2 lefty defensemen. The Leafs used 6 left-handed shot defensemen in last night's game, but we're going to draft our most impactful trade targets next. You're listening to Locked On NHL, your team every day. Today's episode is brought to you by Gametime. Check out the Gametime app, download your account, and use code Locked On for a $20 off your first ticket purchase. Gametime is the best place to go when you're looking to buy tickets for your next event. And it's not only sports, this is also for theater, concerts, you name it. Gametime is the fast and easy way to buy tickets. They've got killer last-minute deals, all-in pricing, views from your seat, and a best price guarantee. Now, what's the best price guarantee? That means that you will find the best price there. And if you find the same tickets in the same section and row for less, Gametime will credit you 110% of the difference. So go check them out on Gametime. Take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use code Locked On for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code Locked On, LOCKEDON, for $20 off. Download Gametime today. Last minute tickets, lowest prices, guaranteed.
Today's show is also brought to you by FanDuel. Get buckets with your first bet on FanDuel. It's North America's #1 sports book, because right now new customers get $150 in bonus bets with any $5 bet. That's $150 if your bet wins. Bet on all your favorite NHL players and teams with quick bets, live same-game parlays, exclusive props, and more. Just visit FanDuel.com/lockedon and shoot your shot. FanDuel,
Hey,
the
Mikey.
official sportsbook.
Before you wrap that up, I want to ask you a question. I know you're dialed in with the Vancouver Canucks. On FanDuel right now, Quinn Hughes for the Norris Trophy is at minus 380. The field is at plus 280. Are you still riding with the favorite here?
Yeah, I think I'm still riding with them. I mean, I think that team would have to fall off a cliff for Quinn Hughes not to get it. I think he's like 10 points up on Cale Makar when it comes to the points race. So he's crushing. He's got like 70-something points at this point in the season. Things would have to fall off a cliff, I think, for him not to get it. Same with Rick Tocchet. Those two, I think, are locks to bring home some hardware this year. I'd be placing a wager on them. The interesting one is now Austin Matthews, who's jumped into the driver's seat for the Hart Trophy as the front runner, which we talked about that last week. I thought he was neck and neck with McKinnon, and he surpassed him. It's now happened on the betting boards as well. So you can make all those wagers over on FanDuel. Just visit FanDuel.com/lockedon and shoot your shot. FanDuel, the official sportsbook partner of the Locked On Network.
All right, welcome back. Locked On NHL. I'm Ross Levitan. Find me on Locked On Senators 5 days a week. Mike is with Locked On Maple Leafs. You can find him on YouTube and wherever you get your podcast. We are local experts on the biggest story, and I just want to remind everyone, this is the best time of year, this and the draft and all things when it's the whole league coming in. You have your individual storylines, and anyone who thinks that they follow the entire league, look, you can for sure, but nobody has as intimate knowledge of every single team as the people who cover them day in and day out. So we have that for you in one place at the Locked On Podcast Network. So go find your team, and you can have new stories every single day wherever you get your podcast. Mikey, we're going to do a trade deadline, trade bait board, finding our most impactful players at each position. Now, one note, and this was from Frank Saravalli the other day, I found it very interesting that over the course of the last number of years, goalies just don't move at the trade deadline. Like, that to me was a wild statistic that if you go back this decade, only 4 NHL goalies have been traded in season. Robin Lehner in 2020, David Rittich in 2021, Marc-Andre Fleury in 22, and Jonathan Quick last year. That's it. Those are the only goalies in the last decade that have been traded at the deadline. Do you think that there's one this season to be had as well?
Wasn't Brodeur? Brodeur wasn't on that list?
Must have been over a decade ago.
I guess. No, was it
He was
really?
traded in season?
Brodeur? Actually, maybe it wasn't in season. Perhaps.
No, he wasn't traded. It was a he signed a tryout contract and then signed.
Oh, and then ended up signing.
So it was mid-season though. It was in November.
But I think I swore I remember St. Louis making a deal. But anyways, was a question, am I surprised to see that?
No, do you think that this could be a year where we see another goalie? Because even though it's 4 in the last decade, it's also 1 in each of the last couple of years.
Yeah, I do I see a starting goaltender getting dealt? No. Could I see, a backup being dealt? Potentially. Like, do I think Markstrom or UC Soros? Like, those are the two names that have kind of popped up and as the star goaltenders who could be available, who are currently number 10 and number 50 on TSN's trade bait board. Do I see them getting dealt? I do not. I don't know. What about you?
No, I don't think they do. Especially Nashville, because they're making a push. They've won 6 in a row. Like, to trade their starting goalie would be sending the wrong message to the team.
It's really interesting because I was, doing we do mock trade Mondays. We've been doing them for the last couple of weeks on the Locked On Leafs podcast, and I was trying to look up, doing a little bit of research for this upcoming Monday and looking to see what trades could be out there potentially for the Maple Leafs. And I came to the realization that this is going to be a seller's market. There are not a lot of sellers out there. There are so many teams that think that they're still in it and really are still in it. Like, for me, I think there's only 4 sellers in the West. And then in the East, I think there's only about 4 sellers in the East, which means you've got 24 potential buyers out there looking to, upgrade their team. So it's interesting. There's not a whole lot of teams out there that I think are willing to move on from their big pieces, which means it's going to be an interesting trade deadline this year, I think.
Yeah, I'm curious to see how it plays out. So with that, let's start our draft. We're each going to take one goalie, even though we just discussed maybe that's the least likely position that a player gets moved at the deadline. But other than that, we'll go with 2 defensemen and with 3 forwards. You can have the first pick, Mikey. Who is your top trade deadline target?
If you're giving me the first pick, I'm going to take a guy who I think is probably would be the most impactful player at this point. I'm going to go with Jake Gensel of the Pittsburgh Penguins. I know he's hurt and injured, and that could, scare off some teams, just not knowing how long he's going to be out for exactly and knowing how he's going to be once he gets back. He's going to have to get back up to full speed while also trying to figure out how to play with his new teammates. But ultimately, come playoff time, I think he'll be ready to go. And I think he'll be a huge addition for whoever adds him. Like, this is a top 6 player, a guy who is a 35 plus goal scorer year in, year out, and he can play the wing. He can play down the middle. I think he would be a tremendous addition for anyone who adds Jake Gensel. I know that Edmonton's been in and sniffing around that. Vancouver apparently has been sniffing around that, and a bunch of other teams. So I think Jake Gensel is going to be a massive addition wherever he ends up. And I would say that would be a good pick for number 1 in the draft, if you ask me. There's a bit of a drop off at the forward position after that too. So thought I'd secure the top forward and the unquestioned top forward in this draft.
Yeah, I don't hate that strategy in terms of getting a forward off your board. I'm just going to go with who I think is going to make the biggest impact, and it's a guy we already spoke about. It's Chris Tanev to me. I just think that what he's going to bring to a competing team is while we know he's going to be hungry too, because I was actually surprised to see he's only ever been out of the first round of the playoffs one time. Or wait, he's got eight games in Calgary that one year, but 8 games. So I guess that is out of the first round, but barely. And it was in the bubble where he had 17 games played. Other than that, he had 3 first-round exits with Vancouver, 2011, 2012, 2015.
He was part of the Cup run when they went to the Cup final. I don't think he played every night, but he was part of it.
Which one was that?
When they went to the Cup final.
Oh, yeah, right. 2011, he would have been a kid at that point. He only played 5 games.
Yeah, he was a rookie. He only played a couple, but he was around.
So he's seen what it's like, what a deep playoff run is like, but he hasn't been the guy. He hasn't been the guy. I just think he's going to also be fighting for his next contract too. He's a guy who's, not the youngest guy on the trade market. He's 34 years old as of December. Mm-hmm. I'm looking at the Dallas Stars for me. Not that we're playing matchmaker here, but it just makes too much sense. They also, just like the Leafs did, they had a game last week in Ottawa where they played 6 left shot defensemen. I think it's going to be, imagine him with Heiskanen, like how much like freedom that would give Heiskanen, just like we saw with Quinn Hughes when they were together in Vancouver. Just the ability to play that solid 2-way game. I've got Chris Tanev as my first pick as the most impactful player as we enter the trade deadline. You want to do snake? Let's go back and forth. It's only 2 of us.
Yeah, we'll go back and forth. I do love that pick, by the way. I think Tanev, whoever gets him, it's going to be a lucky group, and the fan base is going to fall in love with him right away. And so Dallas seems to be the front runner.
You took Gensel, who's 3rd on the TSN trade bait board. Chris Tanev is at number 2.
Yeah, and I'm going to take the guy who's at number 1 on the trade bait board, and that is Noah Hanifin. For as good as Chris Tanev is and will be in the style of game he plays, I think there's no doubt that Hanifin is a better all-around defenseman than Chris Tanev. I think he's a guy who can move the puck. He can be a top pairing guy, and anyone who can get this dude is going to be better off for it. So I'm going to go with Noah Hanifin with my next pick, and I got to tell you, I love my team so far.
Love your team. Okay. Well, we each have one defenseman, and now we're each going to have a forward. And you might turn your nose up at this pick, but I'm going to explain to you why Vladimir Tarasenko is going to help whichever team that he goes to. I've got a stat here. This is like you when you're talking about Michael Bunting for the Calder. You just love this one stat, so I'm going to hit you with a stat.
Go ahead.
Most playoff goals in the last decade. How many players do you think have more goals than Vladimir Tarasenko?
How many have more goals? Well, I would imagine that there's probably a couple of players on the Tampa Bay Lightning.
You're correct. There's 2.
Yeah, I would imagine the Rangers have had a couple of long runs. You got any Rangers in there?
No chance.
Any Hurricanes?
Not even close. There's only one other player, Mikey. Joe Pavelski. That's it.
Okay, so Tarasenko 4th in the last, how long did you say? Last decade?
10 years.
Yeah, I mean, he was on St. Louis.
44 goals in 96 games. 44 goals in 96 playoff games. This guy brings it. Even last year when he got traded to the Rangers, it was disappointing for the team. He still led them with 3 goals in the playoffs. If you want a hired gun, it was a UFA after this year, and Ottawa's probably willing to eat money on a $5 million contract. You get him at $2.5 million, and you're guaranteed to have a first power play in it. Ottawa's goal differential at 5-on-5 this year sucks, and somehow Tarasenko is like a plus 15. He's a good player, and I think that a team's going to put him in a right position to succeed. One little note on this, though. I saw Adam Herman, and we talked about this more on Locked On Senators. If the Rangers wanted him back, they could not have Ottawa retain salary because you can't reacquire a player within a calendar year of having him on your roster at a reduced salary, which is kind of interesting. So you can take the Rangers out of the running for Tarasenko, I think, more or less with that cap hit. But dude, isn't that stat crazy? He has the same amount of playoff goals as Nathan McKinnon in the last 10 years. I think he's got 15 more games than McKinnon, but he's also got like 60 less games than the two guys at the top, which I should mention by name because it is impressive. Nikita Kucherov has the most goals, and then Andre Palat is actually second with 51 goals in 150 games. Tarasenko's played 96 games.
Yeah, the Palat doesn't surprise me, actually. Like, that dude scores goals. He just has goals in the playoffs. Whether or not he does it with the Devils this year is another question.
13 game-winning goals for Palat as well out of 51.
Yeah, that guy's a playoff performer. All right, my third pick in the third round, I'm going to go back to the forward market. I think I'm gonna go with somebody who was a teammate of Vladimir Tarasenko last season and for the last couple of years. I'm gonna go with Pavel Buchnevich. He's 11th currently on TSN's trade bait board. And although I was reading a piece from Jeremy Rutherford in The Athletic, they're not actively shopping Buchnevich, but if a team comes in with a good offer, they are listening. They certainly are listening. And I think you look at the standings, they've kind of fallen out of it a little bit with Nashville really pulling ahead. And the Blues have been a team in the past where you look and you say, all right, do we have a group that can contend? If not, they haven't been afraid to be sellers. You look back a couple of years ago, they traded Paul Stastny. They were in a playoff spot when that happened. The year before that, they made a trade and they dealt, why am I blanking? They dealt another player that they had, and they were in a playoff position at that point. I think you look at this year, they could probably get a really good haul for Pavel Buchnevich. Somebody would give up a lot for this guy. I mean, he's a top 6 forward. He's somebody who's been nearly a point per game over the last 3 seasons. He can score. He's a big body who can play in the playoffs. He's gone deep into the playoffs a couple of times. So I think that Buchnevich would be a massive addition for anybody's top 6. And I'm going to take him with my third overall selection.
I like that one. I really do. I think he's a good player. I also know that he's got a year left on his deal at almost $6 million. That could scare away some teams there. It could also help. Maybe you get him for 2 playoff runs, but
that's what I'm thinking. That wouldn't scare me. That wouldn't scare me. You would have to make the money work, obviously, but I wouldn't be afraid of adding a player of that caliber for next season. The guy's a perennial 30 goal scorer. I'll take that all day long with a big 6 foot. What's he, 6'4", 215, something like that? Yeah. Big body, big boy. It's exactly what you want in the playoffs.
Definitely. No, I'm not disagreeing with that by any stretch. Good pick there, Pavel Buchnevich. I'm seeing a few first round picks on here. I think that's pretty funny. Those are kind of trade bait. I guess they are if certain teams want to move that. But sticking with players, I think you and I are probably both going to leave goalies till last because it is unrealistic. There's like that drive for getting a goalie first because there's only going to be one on each team. But I think it's kind of disingenuous to take a goalie because I don't think any of the big names, the Markstroms, I'm not going to. But I also, the guy who I might take with my third forward pick, I'm not going to take now because I just don't think that this team is going to be in a position to move on. We'll get to those next. We got one break to hit next here. You're listening to Locked On NHL, your team every day. Today's episode is brought to you by eBay Motors. The passion, the drive, the determination, it's all eBay Motors. Keep your ride or die alive with eBay Motors. Everything you need to maintain your vehicle and level it up to peak performance. With over 122 million parts for your number one ride or die, you'll always find exactly what you're looking for. And with eBay Guaranteed Fit, your part is guaranteed to fit your ride every time or your money back. Because with eBay Motors, you're burning rubber, not cash. With all the parts you need at the prices you want, it's easy to turn your car into the MVP and bring home a win. Keep your ride or die alive at ebaymotors.com. Eligible items only. Exclusions apply. eBay Guaranteed Fit only available to U.S. customers. All right, welcome back. Locked On NHL. I'm Ross Levitan. You can find me at Locked On Senators. That's Mike DiStefano over at Locked On Maple Leafs. We are your team every day, and we are in the middle of our trade bait draft. So far, I've taken Chris Tanev, Vladimir Tarasenko. Mikey has taken Noah Hanifin, Jake Gensel, and now Pavel Buchnevich. Those guys are ranked 1, 3, and 11 on the trade bait board. I'm going to go with the sneaky one here for my next pick. I'm going to go with Jordan Eberle. We know he's played in big moments before, but he could be a guy who's not the most expensive to acquire. And I think that's going to be where he helps a team. And he could also be one of those guys who's on the third line, but plays power play, plays in good situations. I like what he's done in Seattle since being moved there. He's obviously got the experience. UFA at the end of the year. I like Jordan Eberle as my next pick.
That's a good pick. I think that is pretty sneaky, sitting here at 16 on TSN's trade bait board, having a decent year too, up to 35 points. You know, he's someone who you can plug into your middle six and be happy with it. He's an expiring UFA at the end of the year too, so that shouldn't matter. And if Seattle is selling off, I would imagine they'd be willing to retain to get an even better price for Jordan Eberle. I like that pick. All right, with my next selection, debating where I want to go. Do I want to round out my forwards here, or do I want to go after a defenseman? I think actually, since I got Noah Hanifin as my lefty, I think I'm going to go for my right D now and give myself a good 1-2 punch. Sean Walker's sitting there. I think Sean Walker is going to be my selection, a defenseman from the Philadelphia Flyers. He's someone who for a while has been on the TSN trade bait board and on all the trade bait boards out there. He's an expiring UFA. He's not making a whole lot of money, just $2.65 million cap hit, but he's a guy who's got, a good two-way game to him. He's got a good first pass. He's got 22 points this year through 60 games, 29 years old. He's not the biggest player, but I think that he's somebody who can come in and give you some decent two-way play out of a top four defenseman. So anyone who's looking for a right shot, top four guy, puck moving abilities, and isn't a complete liability in his own end, Sean Walker would be that guy. I would imagine that there'll be lots of teams, if they strike out on Tanev, will move next on Sean Walker, and he's kind of the runner-up, the consolation prize, if you will, for Tanev. So I'll take Sean Walker.
Okay, Sean Walker's good, and Philly's setting the price way high for him because he's a useful player. Could be for them as well. But I like the pick, and there's a reason why he's number 6 on the trade bait board. I'm going to round out my forwards. I'm just going to take him. This was the guy who I teased before whether or not I was going to, but who wouldn't love to add Tyler Toffoli? I just think the Devils might be in it. But Tyler Toffoli would be the kind of guy. He's even scoring this year. He's got 25 goals. So he's a guy I'd be very interested to add to the team. He's got the playoff experience from his time with the LA Kings, Cup champion, all that. So Tyler Toffoli is going to round out my forward group.
I like that. That was my debate. It was either Tyler Toffoli or Sean Walker, and I decided to go with the blue line and finish that up. Which means, I guess, technically, I've got my pick of the litter here. You're done with your forwards?
Yes, sir.
So I can go with a goaltender, actually. I can go with a goaltender. And again, we spoke on this earlier in the show. Neither of us actually believe that one of these top goalies are going to get moved. But for the sake of the segment here, we're taking a look at players on TSN's latest trade bait board that came out today. And I'm looking at the top goaltender on the board. He's ranked number 10. It's Calgary's Jacob Markstrom. I mean, if you are New Jersey, I still don't know why you don't blow your brains out for this guy. I would. I mean, that they are a goalie away. You pick up maybe another defenseman along the way as well, but they get a good goaltender. This is a completely different team. And I think Jacob Markstrom is and should be at the top of the list. He's got a couple of years left on that deal as well. So you're not only getting him this year, but for a couple of seasons. And he's playing exceptional right now. Like, he is having a big time rebound, bounce back season this year, 914 save percentage, and a 256 goals against. And he's played really, really well over the course of the last month or so too. So I think Markstrom, don't think he goes, but if a team does want to really make that upgraded net and pay the exorbitant price it's going to cost to acquire this guy, he should be the number 1 target. So I'll make him my goaltender of choice.
Okay, I like that. I mean, I have to pick a goalie, which is a bit ridiculous because no goalie of any substance is going to get traded. Now I even wonder about Capo Kakinen because Mackenzie Blackwood just got hurt last night. He's on injured reserve, so we'll see what happens in that situation. I'm going to round out my. Go ahead.
Scroll down to number 50.
Oh, is it? Okay. I'm not going to take UC Saros. He's not getting traded.
Neither is
There's
Markstrom.
0.
But he's on the list. It counts.
Okay, I'll take UC Saros. He's the best goalie available, and he's a stud, and he's got a year left on his deal at $5 million. So I'm taking UC Saros.
Hey, it's in the parameters. He just has to be on the trade bait board. That's all. Has to be on the board, and he is. Just barely, but he is. If not, like, who else would you have taken? Blackwood, I guess, would have been the next best player. Jake Allen would have been in that mix a couple weeks ago. Apparently, he was traded to Colorado, and that didn't happen, evidently. There's not a lot. Like, goalies, they don't move. They don't move a whole lot, especially at the deadline. So that just makes sense. Markstrom, UC Saros, 2 best goalies on the market for us to go with them. So I got my final pick, and I've got to round out the forwards. Who do I want to take at forward? There's a few guys who I could take. Do I want to go with? Oh, man. I almost want to flip a coin between 2 players. Who do you think would be a more impactful addition come playoff time? Adam Henrique, Frank Vetrano, or Max Pacioretty?
Pacioretty just got his 2nd goal of the season.
He's hurt all year, but yeah.
Yeah.
Pretty much Henrique or Vetrano.
Yeah.
Like, Vetrano's having an unbelievable year. Like, this guy's just scoring at will. He's got 26 goals so far this season, 45 points, which is, better than his teammate, obviously, Adam Henrique, 16 goals, 38 points. But Henrique brings more intangibles to the mix. And I guess it depends on what you're looking for. If you're looking for depth, I guess Adam Henrique would provide more because he's someone who you could rely on a little bit more on both ends of the ice. He's obviously a center, which are very highly coveted in the National Hockey League, as opposed to Vetrano. But if you're looking for some more goal scoring, I guess Vetrano would be that guy. But I think if you're a good team, you probably have the goal scoring. So I'm actually going to go with Henrique. Adam Henrique will be the player.
You're going with Adam Henrique. As much as I want to go with Jacob Chychrun for my last pick, I can't have 2 Senators on here. So I'm going to go with Matt Dumba. Somebody's going to get him. I don't think it's going to be for the price that they want, but he's going to get traded. I just think he's going to get traded. So if we're going most likely at this point with the last pick of the draft, I'll go with Matt Dumba. So, hey, next week, the trade deadline is going to be like right there. It's going to be 2 days away. So we'll be back then, but plenty more trade coverage coming up. Locked On Senators, Locked On Maple Leafs, and all across the Locked On NHL network. Let us know in the comments who you think the most impactful players will be on the move. For today, we say goodbye. That's Mike DiStefano. I'm Ross Levitan, and this has been this week's edition of the Eastern Conference Recap on Locked On NHL, your team every day.